Good morning, students. Today we are going to learn how to use pronouns with commands. So, we've already talked about commands in Spanish, right? For the usted form, you could say coma, eat. No digas nada, don't say anything, as the to form. Habla conmigo, talk with me, as the to form. Escriban el ensayo, write the essay for ustedes. Hagamos amigos, let's make friends, for the nosotros form. But sometimes we need to be more specific with our commands and add direct and indirect object pronouns. So, for example, in English, we might say, eat the pizza. We don't maybe always want to say the pizza all the time, so we might say, eat it. Take the test, take it. Read the books, read them. Babysit the children, babysit them. Those are the it and the them. Those are direct object pronouns. So, let's review direct and indirect objects before we get into using them with commands. So a direct object answers the question who or what of the verb. So John wrote the letter to Jane. John is the subject, wrote is the verb. John is the one who's doing the verb, doing the writing. When you want to find direct and indirect object pronouns, your guiding star is the verb. You must always, always, always find the verb, and the verb will show you the direct and indirect object. So the verb lights your way to finding the direct and indirect object. So in this example, ask, John wrote what? What did John write? Well, John wrote the letter. So the letter is the direct object. You ask who or what of the verb, and that gives you the direct object. So wrote what? The letter. The letter is the direct object. An indirect object answers to whom or for whom. So you have to ask of the direct object, to whom or for whom. So in our example above, the direct object is letter. Who did John write the letter to? Jane. So Jane is the indirect object. So we can turn these into pronouns. So in English, the direct object pronouns are me, you, it, him, her, us, you, them. And the indirect object pronouns are exactly the same. Me, you, it, him, her, us, you, them. So John wrote the letter to Jane. John wrote it to Jane. If we want to substitute a pronoun for the letter, it becomes an it. John wrote it to Jane. Or if we want to substitute the pronoun for the indirect object Jane, we say John wrote the letter to her. In Spanish, the direct object pronouns are not the same as the indirect object pronouns. They're really similar, but the third person, singular and plural, are different. So I know it gets really confusing, but just as a review, the direct object pronouns in Spanish are me, te, lo, la, nos, os, los, las. And the indirect object pronouns are me, te, le, nos, os, les. So Juan escribe la carta a Juana. If we want to make the direct object a pronoun, la carta is third person singular and it's a direct object. So you take the direct object pronoun, it's feminine. So Juan la escribe a Juana. Juan writes it to Juana. If we want to put in the pronoun for our indirect object, it's third person singular, so it becomes le. Juana gets substituted for le. So Juan le escribe la carta. If we want to put double object pronouns in there, Juan writes it to her. It becomes le, la, but they don't like the double L's, so the le becomes se. Juan se la escribe. Brief overview of indirect and direct object pronouns. So when we use direct or indirect object pronouns with commands, there are some different word order rules. So in an affirmative command, attach the object pronoun directly to the end of the command, forming a new word. So Julia, describe your community. Julia, describe it. Julia, describe tu comunidad. Julia, descríbela. In a negative command, the object pronoun comes before the command. So Julia, don't tell me the answer. Julia, don't tell me it. Julia, no me digas la respuesta. Julia, no me la digas. Other rules that you know about double object pronouns still apply to the pronouns with commands. So if two pronouns together both start with an L, change the first le or lace to a se. So Enrique, explícale tu punto de vista a Raquel. Enrique, explain your point of view to Rachel. Enrique, explícaselo. When you are working with a reflexive pronoun, the reflexive pronoun will always come before the direct object pronoun. So remember, reflexive pronouns are for saying things like themself, yourself, myself, himself, herself, ourselves. So the reflexive pronouns, as a quick review, are me, te, se, nos, os, se. Those become reflexive. They're things that you do to yourself or one does to oneself. So put your boots on yourself. Ponte las botas, pontelas. Don't put your boots on yourself. No te pongas las botas, no te las pongas. Right? Remember, if it's affirmative, you just stick the indirect and direct object pronouns right to the end of the verb. If it's a negative, don't do it. They have to come before the verb, indirect object, direct object, as two separate words. So no te pongas las botas, no te las pongas. Wear your sweater on yourself. Llévese el suéter. Lléveselo. So reflexive pronouns with nosotros commands. So there's one odd little extra rule with reflexive pronouns with nosotros commands. If you follow the rules shown in this presentation, you would think that saying something like, let's put on ourselves, ponernos, would be pongámonos. However, it's not. Just like Spanish speakers don't like two L double object pronouns, los, les, lo, something like that. It's got to be se, lo, se, las. Next to each other, they also don't like two S's so close to each other, right? Pongámonos, because when you're trying to talk fast, your tongue gets all twisted up and they don't like it. So they drop the first S to make it easier to pronounce. So it's pongámonos, pongámonos. Let's put on ourselves becomes pongámonos. So the ending becomes monos, if you'll notice, right? Instead of mosnos, monos. That's actually the Spanish word for monkey. So sometimes reflexive pronoun nosotros commands are called monkey commands. Look how cute this little baby monkey is. That can help you remember pongámonos, the monkey verbs. For other kinds of nosotros commands, though, the other object pronouns that you might use alongside a nosotros command follows the same rule. So for example, let's organize a meeting, una reunión, organicémosla. Okay, so you don't drop there's no S's to drop because there aren't two S's in there. It's not that hard to pronounce. So it follows the same rule. Organicémosla. Let's order them being the pizzas. Ordenámoslas. For whatever reason, there's two S's here and they just don't care about that one because it isn't nos, right? You couldn't be a monkey, right? If you drop the S here, molas, ordenámolas, it's not a monkey. So don't do it. Just keep the S here. Ordenámoslas. Let's bake it, the bread, el pan. Horneámoslo. Let's call them, like calling the friends, los amigos. Llamámoslos. Again, they're fine with these two S's because you can't make a cute little monkey out of it by saying monos, so they just keep the two S's there. And that is how you do commands with pronouns.